Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. We are discussing a very nerdy topic today, the European elections. We have called the event Turning Points to the Left after the EU election. A few points to what this is all about. Last week, 357 million people in 27 countries were invited to vote. And half of them actually went to the ballots, which is the highest turnout in the last 30 years. They elected 720 members of the European Parliament, and I want to discuss the results tonight, the reasons for it, and the consequences with two left politicians. We have here with us Natasha Romano. Natasha is a climate scientist here in New York, but she also ran for the European Parliament in Greece. And we have Daphne Weber here. Daphne is my comrade from the Democratic Socialist Party, Linke, the left in Germany, and she is a member of the Federal Board. Daphne Weber is a doctoral student at the Humboldt University of Berlin and works as a consultant for 20 years. Thank you for both of you coming and discussing with us. My name is Stefan Bielich. I am the director of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation here in New York. We are a non-profit organization funded by the German government and affiliated with the German political party Die Linke, the left. I will start our event with a short explanation of what the European Parliament is, and then we will take a look at the results on the European level. Then we will discuss the situation in Greece and in Germany. And after around 45 minutes, you are invited to comment or ask questions if you want to. Then also we will have, you can serve yourself. We have a few drinks over there. We will have a light refreshment later. And we try to end not later than 6:30. You may have seen the weather forecast, which is not so nice for tonight. Some rain and storm is announced, so we will see how long we will stay in this. So thank you all for coming. Let me start with a short explanation of what the European Parliament actually is, because a lot of US Americans I talk to are not so much aware of what these elections are about. So although the 27 EU member states do have their own governments, their own parliaments, the European Parliament is still an influential institution. This is where the EU budget is decided, and this involves 190 billion euros, so it's a ton of money, and this is decided within the European Parliament. Also, the president of the EU Commission, let's say there are competing structures, but let's say the highest ranking European official, which is right now Ursula von der Leyen from Germany, a CDU member, a member of the Conservative Party. The president of the Commission is elected in the European Parliament, and the whole Commission, where you have commissioners from all the EU countries, has to be approved by the European Parliament. And there are also, and not so many people know this, there are a few areas where the EU member states don't have any rights anymore. They are just decided only within the European Parliament. So if we talk about trade agreements, international trade agreements, let's say if the EU would make a trade agreement with the United States of America, this was discussed in the past, then it has to be decided within the European Parliament. Also, when we talk about the customs union or competition policy, or for those countries who have the euro as a currency, the monetary policies, all these things are discussed not in the member state parliaments, but in the European Parliament. So I'm saying this to explain it's not just like a symbolic parliament, it's an actual parliament with rights. We as leftists would wish that this parliament would have even more rights. That's not the case now, but it's already an important part. So let me talk about the election results a bit. I hope it's not too small, but what you see here is this is the biggest group after the election. It's called the EPP, the European People's Party. This is a conservative party in the European Parliament. They got more seats than the last time, plus 14 seats. There are 190 members out of 720. The second biggest group is called Socialists and Democrats. We would say a social democratic group. They have lost a few seats. They have now 136 members of the European Parliament. This group is called Renew, and this is very interesting because in some American magazines, they describe this group as somehow progressive. I wouldn't agree. So I would say that it's more a center, liberal, market economy, liberal group. Our German FDP, which has a finance minister in Germany, is part of it. This group has lost a lot of seats, minus 20 seats. They have now 80 seats. Then we have right-wing parties, the Conservatives and Reformists. They did win 7 seats, and then far right, actually Nazis, identity and democracy. It's funny that they have democracy in their name. I think that's the last thing they want. They did win, unfortunately, plus 9 seats, and they have 58 right now. The Green Party, welcome. I'm just explaining the election results. Take a seat. And it would be nice if you would sign in this list because. So the Green Party here has lost a lot, minus 19 seats. They have now 52. And these are the ones who aligned with Natasha, Daphne, and me. Those are the leftists in the European Parliament. Because actually, even if we have been, and we will talk about this later on the European election night, very sad in Germany and in other places. But if we look at the group is even stronger now than the group before. On the evening of the election, it was 1 seat less. But since there are a lot of members in the European Parliament who are not affiliated with a big party, like the Party for Protection of the Animals or such things, or just individually elected members, already 3 of them decided to join our left group. So the left group is now actually stronger than before. So this is the picture. You could say that the parties of the middle, Social Democrats, Conservatives, and here the Renew group, that they have a majority on their own. So theoretically, they could vote for Ursula von der Leyen if they want to again. But practically, these are not very firm parties. So we have a lot of members who not vote along the party lines. So Ursula von der Leyen already announced that she wants to talk with the Green Party, and unfortunately, she also announced that she would like to talk with the party of the Italian Prime Minister Meloni, which is a right-wing party, and this caused some discussions. But this is where we are right now. So just that we have all the same, that we are all at the same stage where we are. And now I would talk to my guests, and I would start with Natasha. So what do you think about this election result on the European level?
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me here today and discussing this. Here in the US, it's very difficult to connect the idea of voting for a very different and very decentralized, or actually centralized, but far away from local interests, political power like it is in the European Union. And that's exactly how the people in the member states feel. They still don't view the European elections as so important and so influential into their everyday life that when they are voting, they use different thinking process. So I think that a very big player in these elections was the abstention, the no-show vote, the vote turnout was actually very large. It might not have been the largest in the last decade, the last 2 decades, but still it was important enough to show that a lot of people in the member states will not consider these elections important enough to go out and vote. And that is a very big problem, and that is something that needs to be really understood. And what's going on? Why is this happening? The second, of course, is that people still vote along party lines. You mentioned earlier that European elections, the European Union actually nowadays determines a very big part of the financial and the economic policies in each of the member states. It also plays a very big role in how matters like immigration are being addressed, or how the wars that are taking place right now around Europe. We have 2 wars actually in our periphery. And that is very important because decisions are being made as a coherent group, even though we are not politically organized as a coherent group. Other important decisions is the agricultural policy. Agricultural policy, which is very influential, has really turned the map of the development in, especially in the countries of the periphery, like southern countries like Greece and Italy and France and Portugal, and how, for example, the European Union, the decisions are now being made there against and despite decisions or needs of local populations. Climate change is a very big, important topic in the agenda this year, because the European Union is trying to put forward the green agenda or the green transition. Of course, it is a capitalist green transition. It is based on the ideas of free market and competition, and also is following mandates which align with the dogma, the European dogma, the European American dogma against Russian sources of energy. That has led to increases of prices, and the European people are not very happy about that. But they blame the local governments, not yet because they don't realize, they don't understand how pervasive are European policies to their everyday life and what's going on in their countries. So this is one of the structural important parts, that people in Europe go out and they vote for parties because they want to punish their own governments. And the problem is that if they have a right-wing government, they will vote for not like Greece. They will vote for extreme right parties which are against, for example, the green agenda, or questioning or skepticism against the green agenda, or they are, for example, against the war in Ukraine, and or maybe they are understanding these discrepancies between the European Union policy towards Ukraine and Palestine. And there are other groups, and there are people who are going out and vote to punish the government. But that way they send extreme right politicians into European Union, which is counterintuitive, because they're sending politicians that are against the European projects. They are against the basic ideas that European Union was based on, which was built on, and it should be progressing towards a more unification, more social, support of the welfare state, more support of peace and leadership roles for Europe in the world. And these parts are actually not doing it. So, in fact, they are, as we say, shooting their own food. The voters in Europe shooting their own food. There are a lot of other nuances. For example, what the youth vote was. I think that we will discuss it with you later. And the white Greens got such a big hit, particularly this year. I think that these are very interesting topics, and let's discussion go forward. And then
yeah. And thank you, Natasha. And Daphne, was the election result what you have expected or what you hoped for?
Well, somehow, yes. So I'm very excited to be here. It's my first time in New York, and I feel like a boiled lobster from outside. So
I feel
with two brain cells left, so my terrible accent, please excuse me, and I will try my best. So I think that it's somehow, as we guessed, in the parliament that was before, like from 2019 to 2024, every fifth member of parliament was part of the extreme right factions. So every fifth, and I think now it will be like even more, like just a quarter, and they have fights among themselves. So, for example, the German AfD, it's a right-wing extremist party. They have thrown them out, and Meloni, who's the Italian prime minister, who's actually a fascist, so she said to herself, I'm a fascist, and they don't want to cooperate with the German AfD anymore because they said stuff about like the Nazi past, and so they have a fight amongst themselves, and when the left fights, we always, so the voters at the ballots, they say, well, the left is just fighting, we cannot elect, we cannot vote for the left. But when the right-wing parties, they are fighting like all the time, but obviously there's no consequence. So people vote for the right. And this is something that I don't get it. So well, let's move to my notes, for example. Yeah, I think that Europe is very scattered. So you have like different conditions in every country. For example, like Greece is not the same as in Germany, where you have a strong economy, but still a lot of people are very, very poor. Yes, so the social injustice is very, very big. And in France, it's like somehow the same. But I think I will agree on this that they want to punish their own government by voting in European elections. You can also see this in the north of Europe, where they voted like left and green parties because they have right-wing governments. So it's like quite interesting. But I think that there were three topics that are like very important now for the European continent. It's the war that's going on in like Russia against Ukraine. I think Palestine is also a subject, but it's a very difficult subject, especially in Germany. Then the social injustice and the climate crisis. And concerning the social injustice, I think that the living, a fact, I don't think it's a fact, that the living wages declined during the pandemic in almost all European states. And the housing is extremely expensive, especially in the cities. So people just can't afford homes anymore. I don't know. I think it's a problem, also a New York problem. And the European Parliament, they passed a minimum wage bill, for example, in the last elections or in the last last legislation. They passed a minimum wage bill, so every European country now has to act on minimum wages. So they did quite also good stuff, not just bad stuff. So there's a huge social injustice, but they try to act on it. Even the European Commission, where the conservatives are strong. And you have this one.
You have always action.
Berlin is a fisherman's village. So, and then you have the climate change problem. I think that people are very aware of climate change, so everybody gets it. So somehow something has to happen. But there are huge differences in approaching the subject. And you also already mentioned the European Green Deal. So it takes the same technology from the New Deal and this stuff, and it's somehow neoliberal. So they are hoping for some technology to come up and magically save us somehow from climate change. And the left, it's more difficult for us because we say we have to have a redistribution of wealth. We have to have anti-capitalist answers and somehow strong state like the IRA. We have to do like similar things maybe. And the population, they fear that their standards of living will decline even further as they have to pay for the climate measures, the stuff that has to be done to save the climate. And the right then comes and says, well, there's no such thing as climate change, or technology will save us. And the conservatives, they move away from solutions to attract voters back from the right. And this is like very dangerous actually, because the conservatives then, as Stefan also said, they move to the right, and then there's this split. So they are not focused on solutions. And when you see this whole blue thing, when you take the conservatives and the two right-wing factions, you have like a block. You can't do anything about it. And then the third topic that is, I think, was very important for the elections is the war going on in Europe, that Putin attacked Ukraine in 2022. And I think this is a very, I don't know if it's like the same in every country, but a very complex issue, because people fear that they are going to be next. And so there's this huge armament. So the European Union invests in arms and in military, and the member states invest in arms and in military, and they use people's fear of war to legitimize this position and to legitimize this spending billions on military. And on the other hand, they cut social services. So it's somehow insane, and NATO has made its comeback, and I feel like the 80s and the peace movement never happened, and there's also not really an own foreign policy in Europe that focuses on something like diplomacy or maybe own military structures, but maybe we could also disagree on this, but somehow NATO has made its comeback, and so I think it's very, I don't see that we have a proper or easy progressive left-wing perspective for the next 5 or 10 years. And I think it sounds a little pessimistic, but I feel that it's going to somehow get worse.
Before we come to the situation in Greece and in Germany, maybe one thing, since you mentioned foreign policy, just to explain how it works. Foreign policy is still a thing that every country can decide on its own, but we also have a European foreign service. We have a representative for foreign policy. His name is Borrell, and he can only do things that every member state agrees on. So they have to agree on everything. So there's like a veto for every of the 27 countries. And you can imagine if, let's say, Viktor Orban from Hungary is not agreeing with something and can block things, you cannot really move. So what I'm saying here is foreign policy is mostly still a thing on the national level and not so much on the European level. Let's go to the countries now, and I will start with Greece again. Maybe you can explain for what the party you were running for, how your party did, and what the background of your party is.
Yes. Let me just start by saying that in Greece for the last 5.5 years, we have a center-right government. The New Democracy is called the party, and they have been implementing a mild austerity, but a very authoritarian state. And they have completely shattered the public health system. They have started to privatize higher education, which was public before in Greece. And they have also attacked a lot of human rights that brought in discussion very slowly, the discussion of, for example, abortion, even though not very targeted and very clear as it happens here in the US, but it is part of the narrative that we are the party for the family and the party for the strong patriotic forces. And they are also very much against immigration, to the point that actually today is the first anniversary of one of the worst, maybe the worst accident, but it wasn't really an accident, of dying, 700 immigrants died in Greece, 3/4 last year on this day. And the Greek government, in the best case scenario, they didn't do anything to save them, even though they were very close. The support was very close, but they didn't do anything to help them. Or some people say that they actually maybe even provoked their demise. So, this is the party. Now, this party comes in the heels of austerity, extreme austerity. Greece was the example, the poster child of austerity in Europe during the last decade. It was a European inflicted austerity in Greece, and at the time the government was a left government, Syriza. I was a member of that party at the time. Alexis Tsipras was the prime minister. The European Union, and not only the European Union, NATO and the US, etc., they forced Greece to accept IMF supervision and very, very harsh terms of economic recovery. And that led the country into recession. Now, we know this is theory, political theory. Whenever you have austerity, whenever you have very harsh economic conditions, hard inequality, a deterioration of the welfare state, what happens? Well, the extreme right rises. And we've seen this increase during the Syriza years. That was very much in check because while the government had to implement austerity, at the same time, it had very big protections for civil rights and for immigrants. And so, but when the right-wing government came into power, that all went away. So now in this, but recently, Alexis Tsipras stepped down, and the party elected from white-based elections, elected a president which was not a member of the party. It was someone who just showed up and took the election. It's probably a unique case, historical example of how an external force will come in and subjugate the entire party. And at that time, some key members of the parliament, seceded, and these formed a new, smaller party, which was more like the left-wing party to the left of Syriza. Now Syriza has moved to the center, so more left, but it is a new party, like 6 months. So I was a member of this party, and I was a member of the ballot. We had 42 people. I was one of the 42 people on the ballot for the European election. We didn't have much time to run for this election, and but we did our best. We brought just barely. We reached the level of electing one representative in the European Parliament. The important point is that at the same time as the right got very strong in Greece and has now the power, in these elections, we saw the left part of the spectrum, all the parties on the left, which are several parties, completely splintered and refused to unite into a political formation that would elect 1 or 2 or 3 representatives. The reasons of this refusal to come together were mainly ideological, but not too ideological. Some of them were hinged in narratives of the past, like, for example, what happened during the austerity years and the previous government of the Syriza party. On the right hand, on the right side of the government party, we have a lot of extra ultra-right parties which came into power, some more apolitical, some veiled apolitical. They pretend to be apolitical, but they actually have a narrative which is very extra ultra-right. And these parties were able to, unfortunately, elect representatives. If you look at the political spectrum in Greece, it's split in the middle. Syriza and everything to the left is about 42%, and the rest is the Greek government right now, which is the center right, and the right-wing parties represent the rest. They are immediately after the elections, where the government party lost, as I said, about 10 percentage points, which were not, we didn't go to the left, actually, they went to the extreme right. What happened was what Daphne described earlier. The prime minister came out and restructured the government like today and moved it more to the right. So what happens now is that the center, and I'm fearing that this is what will happen with the EP party in Europe, is trying to cater to their interests and trying to collect the forces from the ultra right. They will themselves move more to the right with more anti-popular policies and measures.
Thank you. So what we see here for a lot of Europeans, I would think most European voters, not the European level, was a point they decided about. It was more the national level. And that brings me to the biggest country in the European Union, Germany. Daphne, maybe you can describe the general political situation in Germany regarding the election, and then talk about our party a bit.
Yeah, maybe you can also add, because Stefan was a member of parliament for a very long time, when things were better.
But not because of me.
One second. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for this insight. I just wanted to say that one of the countries who imposed this strong austerity on Greece, it has been Germany back then. And even now, Germany acts in the European Union like austerity politics. So everyone has to save, they call it, but it means like austerity and impoverishment for a lot of people. So Germany has a center-left government at the moment. The Social Democrats, the Greens, and the Liberals, but not the Liberals in a positive sense, but the neoliberals. They just want to like do austerity politics, but stand on the military. And well, they had a quite ambitious project, I think. The elections took place in 2021. Yes, you know. And there will be elections next year again. So they had an ambitious project. They wanted to improve the financial security for kids. They wanted to do like climate protection policies. They wanted to do like cheaper rents, and they failed almost everything. So they did nothing of this. Yeah. Well, the war happened, and then they said, well, we have to change everything. We have to spend on the military, and there's no money for like social justice or climate protection. But they almost failed everything. So, and this nourishes like the Conservative Party and the extreme right-wing party. And sometimes now it's dropped again, but sometimes they were together. They were like over 50%. And in the east of Germany, you have a huge split between west and east, still going on today. And the right-wing extremists, they are the strongest force in every county. Yeah, in every county in the east of Germany. And this seems quite dangerous, because in the next elections, I think it will become very, very right wing, but I feel that maybe you have a different approach, but I feel that the Conservatives and the right wing, they won't form a government together, because there is still this you don't do things with the right wing extremists, but on a very municipal basis, they already work together. So, but not on the state, not in the state, and not in the in the counties, but the conservatives themselves, they quite do the same policy as the right-wing extremists. So they attack immigrants, they attack the jobless people, they attack women, they attack trans people. So they find all these like people who are vulnerable in society, and they attack them. And there's a huge a discourse against immigrants at the moment in Germany, which is purely hostile against people who fled war, people with different skin colors, people who come from different countries, but not everything. Like Sweden is fine, but from African countries or from Asian countries, and it makes me really scared because people are getting attacked more and more often on the streets, and I feel that as the right-wing movement grows, they feel very safe in attacking people and also physically attacking people, not just in the internet. It's bad, but they are physically starting to attack politicians and immigrants. And yeah, well, maybe we can add something, but
Maybe I just add a few things. The question is, why did they not fulfill all the promises? And Daphne mentioned the war, but maybe I would add one thing. The German parliament decided a while ago a very stupid thing, that we have a debt ceiling. So we restricted ourselves in the constitution to not increase our debt. At the same time, we have one party in the government who is now the finance minister from the Renew group, from the FDP. They are totally committed to not increase taxes. Never. And if you do this, debt ceiling, you are not increasing taxes, but then you have to spend much, much more. I don't want to discuss the question if it is necessary or not, but they, of course, increase the spending for the military now in a terrible way. Then you don't have the money anymore. So, and then the beautiful idea of child security money, I don't know what's called in English. It was a really good idea. We supported the minister. She was actually speaking here at the CSW, Lisa Paus. She was the speaker here at one of our events. She's really convinced that this protection of children is a good thing. But she doesn't get the money from the government because we spend it somewhere else. They are not able, I mean, they are able, but they are not willing to change this policy, and that makes it worse. And to your question, if the CDU, our conservatives, will work with the right-wing AfD or not, I don't know. I'm not sure anymore. I've just seen a terrible documentary about the rise of the Nazis. I don't want to compare it with the 1930s because we are in a different time, but still, I mean, they start discussing if the next state election we will have in a state in the east, Thuringia. We still have a left-wing prime minister there. And in all polls, either the CDU decides to form a coalition with the left-wing party, with us, or with the right-wing AfD. Without this, there's no majority. And I don't know what they are doing. The governor is totally right. Sometimes they are talking like the AfD. There are not so much differences anymore. But maybe there's a solution, and now I'm getting back to you for them, because we have a new party on the scene, which is a split off of our party, so maybe you can describe the mess on the left.
I totally forgot.
Yeah. I'm sorry for bringing these people up, but it's part of the reality we have to explain.
So I should explain it now.
Yeah, please.
Well, we have a party split in the left, and one of the most prominent women, she founded her own party, and the party's name is also her name. It's her own name, so it's like a one-woman show somehow. But they have some pretty good politicians. They have some pretty good politicians, but it's more like a one-woman show. And she does actually something interesting, but also dangerous. She said like we have to increase the wages and we have to act on social injustice and on the rent, on the housing problem. But climate change is not important for workers, and the immigrants are also bad. So she puts like racist policies together with like as nationalist politics, but also I didn't want to say it. Nationalist politics and also like social democratic politics. And they are a very young party, have very few members, but they have a better, they were better at the election polls than, for example, our party. And I think they will they will also run for the federal elections, and I think they will be quite successful until she steps back, because it's her figure. She's like very popular.
Just to give you an idea about the development of the left in Germany, when our party did run the first time as the left, Linke, for the Bundestag in 2005, we got 8%. Then 2009, also the time when I was elected the first time, we got 12%. Then again 8, 5, and now at the European elections 2.7. So you can see, and Sarah Wagenknecht's party came out of nothing and they got 6% of the European election. If you look at the eastern state, and Daphne mentioned the differences between East Germany and West Germany, in the eastern states, Sarah Wagenknecht party is between 12 and 16%, while our party is going down to 5%. So it's really, really dangerous. And even if the two of us would agree that this is not a real party and also not a real ideology to be left and right at the same time, the people, or some people, like her. I think what they say is, this woman is saying what I think. The reason for it is that she is just collecting what the people think and saying this. So you are against EV cars. I'm in favor of the good old gasoline cars too. You are against vegans. Let's eat meat. She was actually saying this. We have to eat more meat. And I think she doesn't care about, she cares about food, but not that way. But she's just saying the things that people want to hear to add up. And then people vote for her, unfortunately. My personal opinion is, and I've seen that say this publicly, so I can't say it again. I think she's not caring so much about politics. She's also a writer. She earns tons of money. She's a millionaire. She earns tons of money by selling books. And of course, being famous is helpful by selling books. So that's my explanation, but it's still sad because it has the power actually to destroy the left party. I hope the federal board will make a lot of good decisions, and it's not going to happen. So
I think there are like deep structural problems. Stefan mentioned the decline at the balance, and I think this is not just that you put forward the wrong program or something like this, but I think the roots are deeper, as also the Social Democrats are in decline. They gained like 15% of the votes, and they were like huge people's party with 40, 45, 50, 60% of the votes back then. So there's a problem on the left in general, not just the left party, but also the Greens. They lost a lot of votes, and they were very popular amongst young people, but they lost like half of the votes in the European election compared to the elections in 2021. So it's in general a decline on the left, and I think the reasons are very deeply structural reasons, and it's not just wrong people and sometimes saying the wrong things, and like debate yesterday or whatever, and
the youth is very interesting, the youth switch, because if you remember a few years ago, we had this green movement of the youth, like Fridays for climate and with Greta Thunberg. This movement and that really energized young people across the world, and many leaders thought, even Alexis Tsipras at the time in Greece thought that let's give vote to the 16 and the 17-year-olds. And as soon as they got the vote, they voted Conservative. And so it was, and now in these elections, we see that even though we had the experience of this big movement, LGBTQ rights are very big in young people. So in that sense, civil rights, but yet politically they moved to the right. So that to me, that is extremely interesting.
Yeah, same. So Germany decided that this time, the first time, 16 and 17-year-old people could vote. And the strongest party was not the Greens and not the left, it was on the right. So that's unfortunately one result. I would come to the end of our panel conversation so that you can have the chance to comment and ask. So I would ask you some future related questions. So what do you think? Your party is very young, it's very new, it didn't get a seat in the European Parliament, but how do you look in the future of the Greece politics and the European politics?
Well, yes, for the moment, I don't see that in Greek politics, the left can go very far without doing some collaborations or working together. A few parties, we say the same things, and we are just because of the leaderships are too strong personalities, and they don't want to merge or work together. I think we see that in France as well. And also Syriza, which a very big part of its base, and also some of the politicians in it, not its president, are still in, I would say, center left or maybe left. They could also work together with us in this. I see potential in that. Alexis Tsipras is still speaking to people and still present in our politics. And who knows, he might decide to come back, or maybe a new person will emerge in this situation. And so everyone will have to align behind that just to put a block against the rise.
And Daphne, I just joked with her, is very famous today because she was quoted in a magazine in Germany today, in Der Spiegel, and they told everyone that you just wrote a strategic paper for the future of the party. So now's your chance.
Yeah. I think this is just like nerdy stuff, and maybe I will add to the France.
Yes.
In France, it's quite interesting to have a very right-wing party, Rassemblement National, under Marine Le Pen, and even her father was like a fascist, and they somehow won the votes. And then Macron, who's like also the Renew, like very neoliberal guy, and he's not very popular, and he called for new elections after the defeat at the ballots. And like 1 day after or 2 days after, the French, the Social Democrats, the Greens, the Communist Party, and the
Scholz party.
yeah,
What's the name?
yeah. They formed a Front Populaire, so a broad coalition to fight back against the Rassemblement National, so the extreme right, and also Macron, so the neoliberals, because everywhere where neoliberals were at the government and did this social cuts and spending on military, the right wing rises. So this is linked together somehow, and they will have this broad coalition and try to get into power at the next elections and save the country, so to speak, from the right wing, but also from the neoliberals. And I'm quite intrigued by this Vorgang and by this that they do this like this. And I think that in Germany we should, because the parties on the left side or left of the conservatives and the right wings, they are all very bad at the elections. Maybe we should talk to the Social Democrats and the Greens and talk to each other. have to laugh because Stefan was one of the guys who brought this up like 10 years ago. And I was still, well, I was very young and I was not so in favor because I'm more radical at this time. But I think that the political situation is so bad that we have to maybe form a coalition. Do you put it in the internet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you are.
That's what I said. And I think that we, the right runs on narratives of fear. And I think that we as a left, we have to relearn how to run on narratives of hope. And I think we have to rediscover these narratives of hope, like Sanders did it, and well, a few politicians, they somehow managed to do so, and I think we have to relearn this, although my talk today wasn't really hopeful, but I think we also have to claim like terms of freedom and security, like social security. The right always talks about solidarity, the right always talks about security. Why don't we talk about social security? It's not just military security, but when you lose your home, you need security also in like in a social sense. And I think we have to dwell on these narratives of hope again and well talk to the other activists and build broad coalitions against the far right. So that's not. Yeah, but
I'm in favor of it. Okay, so we would stop here. If you are interested, you can ask questions, you can comment, and we already have.
Yeah, well, thank you. And of course, Americans cannot realize from the word value Trump that he's president. We're the last ones to be critical of what's going on in Europe. Many years ago, I attended a conference where we talked about how after the recession of 2007, 2009, cut social benefits in Europe, that all these social democratic regimes came back. I mean, it was like an eye-opening thing today because of the recession they cut. And so what I'm hearing here is sort of the progression of what I heard maybe 10 or 15 years ago, getting worse. And I was just curious if you could further go into questions like, for example, agrarian policy. Because agrarian policy, because we know that the right-wing movements in these societies have a strong base in the rural areas. And that is an issue we saw when Ukraine, there was all this opposition in Poland, that Ukrainian exports go in, and, and stuff like that. And I'm just curious how you see that. And the second thing would be this question of the interaction of the war in Ukraine and Israel on Gaza. I get gathered from, I'm a reporter, I've been following this pretty carefully now for 2 years, and I am familiar with domestic politics in Europe. And I get the sense that you're complaining about the desire to bring arm that is going on in Germany, how it's taking away from other issues. But then you have the objective fact that this war was, as far as I'm concerned, initiated by Putin on February 22nd, and that's the reality. And that, people got to deal with it one way or the other. I mean, I'm just wondering how these are interacting in public opinion in your societies. It seems like a big, use the New York term, mishmash.
Okay. Natasha, are you able to talk about agriculture, rural areas?
The agricultural policy in Europe, it's one thing that alienated the base in the rural areas by doing what? By actually converting their product into something that had to be standardized across Europe. For example, it conformed each country's agricultural policy to what the entire continent should serve. And that had the result to create a discrepancy between what each economy could produce, what it was allowed to produce because of the European policies, and also what people wanted to do. As a result, fewer and fewer people stayed in this economy, and they turned into other sources of income like tourism and things like that. And that was actually a very an important change in the infrastructure, the basis of the society in countries like Greece, for example. Now, the left didn't capture that moment. It didn't increase. It didn't capture this, the change in the agricultural policies in Europe. There was a lot of reaction to it. There was criticism, but of course at the time we weren't able to propose a different model to develop. And I think now, if the left had more power in the European Parliament, would be able to propose perhaps some not just corrections, but really readdressing the issue of agricultural policies in Europe, particularly at a time where we have climate change. And now the different countries have, as a matter of fact, changing their output, what they can produce and what they need to be importing from other countries. So yeah, I mean, this is now, and as I said, these people, they're not the poorest part of the population by any means. In our country, the people who work in the land, because the European Union has taken care of them and has given them a lot of provisions, a lot of stipends and so forth. But they are not. That's not a model for development for the countryside. So the countryside has been left it has been abandoned. And that has a big influence in how people vote and how they think.
Maybe we should add for you that the by far biggest part of the European budget goes into agriculture. So there's a lot of subsidies, and there's of course a conflict between climate change, how the world should develop, but also with the people who are actually right now living on this economical system. So it is a really complicated topic. Let's come to another really complicated topic, which is the war. Daphne, you mentioned it. So the question is, let's say, can you describe the divisions within, let's say, German society regarding the war? Because I think he's right with, yes, there was an attack, and yes, it is understandable that people don't want to be defenseless. But on the other side now, militarists and the big armament companies are taking over the discourse. So
Stefan also engaged a lot on these subjects, and well, I think it's very complex. So there's a huge division in at least German society. Like one half said you shouldn't deliver arms to Ukraine because Russia might get angry and attack us. And the other half says you have to give Ukraine the weapons that it needs to fight back Russia and to actually also regain the lost territories like the Crimea and Putin took it in 2014, so the war is going on for 10 years actually. But I would also argue that the NATO has like 17 times, I think 17 times more military stuff, I don't know how to express this properly, than Russia, for example, and the EU has like 4 to 5 more times of all this military stuff. So they could always fight back if Russia attacked. So, that leads me to that you shouldn't like spend even more on military and cut on social services. But indeed, Putin is a war criminal and he has started this war and he has attacked Ukraine and Ukraine has to somehow defend itself. So I would say that it's a total dilemma. Like the one answer, not delivering weapons, is somehow difficult or wrong, and the other one, that there's a huge fear in to be dragged into the war, that Putin will attack other countries in the European Union, to be like a member of a part of the war, and one of the conflict parties. And well, that's also true. So I think that each of the options is somehow not 100% right. The left party, we go by not delivering weapons, but engaging in diplomacy and delivering like civil support, like food and Medicare and stuff. But I also think that we have a huge gap or no proper answer in what is left-wing security politics or left-wing military politics. And we have avoided, I don't know how it is in Greece, we have avoided to discuss these things out of a like dogma not to discuss these things as leftists. But I think we have to, and we have to provide answers also on this field, because people, they have fear, they have like action about this stuff. So we have to provide proper answers, not spending like lots and billions on military while cutting short all the other stuff, but also not saying, well, let's don't have a take on military, because obviously you have to defend oneself if it's.
One thing that I would add to this from the perspective of the Greek left is that while we totally agree that Putin is an aggressor, that Putin invaded a sovereign country, but at the same time, we recognize that the left has always been on the part of peace and negotiation and diplomacy and bringing in solutions. The fact that the European governments didn't work hard enough to push back on claims by NATO and on claims by other forces, which actually aggravated the situation, and we weren't able to protect Ukraine before the war started, which that would be the protection really of the citizens of Ukraine, because and really their sovereign country. I think that Europe in the last decade showed that it's not sovereign, it's not an autonomous power, but it's actually following very much behind what the US dictates. And that I think it is not right, not because US doesn't do the right thing often, but because Europe has Europe is in a position to actually negotiate a convergence of different powers in the area and keep the peace aligned between China and the United States, for example, the trade wars, also the war between with Ukraine, etc. So Europe should have a much more should assert itself, and I think this is the right moment to do so. And with the rise of the left bloc that we have been discussing, we are hoping that will continue. Otherwise, the rise of the extreme right and the right, I think, will become even more it will feed into US politics and follow more US politics, especially if Trump is elected, because they are on the same block.
I was wondering about the state of the labor movements in Germany and Greece and the relationship with political parties. I assume that in Germany, the entire labor movement is still married to the Social Democrats. That Sarah Wagner has not won any trade union support. I presume not. Has the Left Party ever been able to win trade union support? And who, I don't really know what the state of the labor movement is in Greece, but where is it politically aligned? So what remains of Syriza, or it remains with PASOK, or what is it?
Thank you for the question. As you can see, we're working with the unions. Maybe you start.
No, I will keep it short, we'll get this right. So the Social Democrats are really involved in the unions, but the unions, they don't endorse, like, when there's an election, they don't endorse the party. But as there are many people, important people in the unions are members of the Social Democrats, yes, they are linked closely together, and even with the steel workers and metal workers and industrial workers, it's even closer than with the social services. We managed to somehow tie links to the service workers union, and the Greens also tried to do so, but not as successfully as the Social Democrats, because of the long history of going together. The Social Democrats and the unions, they are very much aligned for the last 200 years.
Yes, Greece is, well, the labor union movement was very much aligned with the PASOK, the Socialist Party that was in power in the 80s and the 90s, which actually was the first party which allowed them to have collective bargaining and to form collaborative cooperatives and so forth, and really strengthened them with a lot of legislation. When the right-wing government came into, when Syriza came into power, of course, it inherited that, because at the time, PASOK collapsed when Syriza rose into power, and that's always the case. When the Social Democrats fall, then the left rises. So at the time, a lot of labor unions came to Syriza. Right now, they have been under attack from the central government, but they are aligning towards Syriza and other forces of the left. Some of them with the new left party that I can remember, but not very clearly.
And more questions or comments? Okay, sorry.
You know, the Latino community, they do follow the EU a lot. And I have been watching some podcasts because they're very strong in what is happening in Europe right now with the rise of Argentina and delay, which is very scary right now for the Latino community. And we also seen things happening also in Peru and in Ecuador. Well, Milei is the most scary of all right now. And what was happening with these elections in the EU, I'm wondering, why do you guys think that it will happen to Latin America? Even though United States has a hand, on top of Latin America, but with the rise and the win of Trump, which a lot of people here, a lot of Latinos, we are very, very concerned if Trump wins. But a lot of people said maybe he should win, because if he doesn't win, all these people take arm and people are afraid they will come on the street. That is one thing. So, but people are concerned. And with this, what happened in the EU, and then we have Milei, and what Milei is doing in Argentina. I mean, he's selling everything in Argentina. There is only 3 things that he decided. They decided that we will take it out of the block, and it will be private, which are one of the, I forgot the other 2, but one of them is the post office. And for the rest of the thing, even the water, the ocean, which in Chile, the ocean is private. So I just want you guys to comment about Latin America.
Has one of you thought about it?
I don't know whether there are direct parallels, but I think that with the globalization and the financial interests which now are across borders, it makes sense to me to see phenomena like that, where the neoliberal powers want to gain traction across the world. It's not a coincidence that water, for example, is such a big topic right now being privatized across the world. We see that in Greece, we see that in many countries in Europe as well, and we see it in Latin America. It's I think that this is I can see the parallels now. Whether the one pushes the other, I'm not sure if the things will happen in such a sequence, but I think they all respond to the same forces.
I would add one thing, my experience, I used to be a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee in Germany, and as much as they talk about human rights and democracy, on the top of the list is economy. And when I've been to Brazil during the Bolsonaro times, you wouldn't have heard one word by the German government about all the bad things. We talked to the industry chamber, and they talked about the things that are getting better for them. So, and the worst thing, we had it in our chat group when Milei was now invited to Germany, and it's bad enough that he gets a prize for being the best neoliberal by a weird organization in Germany. He was also immediately invited by the German chancellor, who is a social democrat, and I mean, I wouldn't expect anything, to be honest, regarding this from the European Union. They talk a lot about human rights, and it's not that they are against it, but on the top is always the economic question. And we have an expert here, so.
Not an expert, but unfortunately Argentina in this time. Just a comment from today. I mean, the G7 is meeting and Milei was especially invited. So he's in the group photo. He was invited and welcomed by Meloni and by all the others. So yeah, he's being normalized very, very easily. I think in ways that even Bolsonaro wasn't, because I feel the mood, the soil is very fertile for it.
Sorry. There was another question?
Yes, I would like to ask, I will express my impression. Is what happened in Europe after the Second World War. They developed the universal health care and the safety net. And this was, I believe there are more or less in all the countries of Europe that are unlike the United States. So they doesn't have this issue to get involved anymore. And I'm trying to think with if the United States is very clear, if you have universal health care and free higher education would be a great shift to the left. For the United States, I mean, it's going to happen, but it's going to take a little bit more time. And so what I see in the Europe, a major institute for positive environment for the whole world, but I mean, if you don't have the safety net and you don't have a secure environment, gets problems. And what other issues? Is there another issue in Europe that's basic one for the rest?
Okay. There was another question? Yeah, I will add this and then we come to close the round.
Yeah, I think it's necessary. It's a good idea. It's necessary to run for the European Parliament, despite the fact that it doesn't have the power that a number of other parliaments do. National parliaments do. But I don't believe that the European Union Parliament or any other part of the European Union would be able actually to carry out the long term, I don't believe we'll be able to carry out, all the, European unity that's been predicted by, many. Nonetheless, let me say that I am a member of the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, though I do not speak for them. I think that it's necessary to run a program of some question that didn't come up, though I believe it should have tonight, which is it possible to win and keep demands through reforms only, or will it take revolution? And I would say ultimately it will not be revolution, but that it's certainly very possible. I as a shop steward and a union, minor union official in the transport workers union in the city, I was able for many years to work with people, including Republicans, on any number of issues fighting for workers' needs. And pointing out to them and to other workers who are paying attention that we can win demand under capitalism, but not keep them. That would take revolution. So what the comrade, what it was saying, I think that's something that is hard to do, but not so hard to state. Let me add one more thing, which is that the Ukrainian people have the right to weapons wherever they can get them. And a hypothetical kind of case, if it came up in a parliament of any country, that the Ukrainians were demanding, the Ukrainian government was demanding weapons from wherever, and the parliament started getting together weapons. But somebody said, oh, we can't do that. You're helping an imperialist against another imperialist. Can't do that. You have to take no sides. And I would say it obviously will be a greater blow against imperialism to support the Ukrainian people. We have the right to get arms wherever they possibly can.
Okay. At the end, we get big questions, reform or revolution, and why, as far as I understood, what are the leftists fighting for in Europe when we already fought successfully for a good health insurance system and free education, but like we have it here in the US. So who wants to start? And we will also phasing out our conversation here.
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, we did fight it and we fought it successfully, but then there was a very big wave of neoliberal policies after, especially 1980s. And what we have seen is now that this social state, the welfare state in Europe, and especially in countries like Greece, for example, after the recession, has been shattered. Right now, and actually, what happens now, the project of the neoliberal government, New Democracy in Greece, is actually not to bring up the welfare state, the public education, healthcare system, but bring in the equivalent private sector in these areas, of private hospitals, private schools, and so forth. And I think that so our narrative, our thesis should still be of welfare state, but now we have to re-convince people again why it is important to have that, even in Europe, because people don't anymore see very clearly why should they pay more taxes, for example, to have a better public healthcare system, rather than if they can afford to go to an expensive or not so expensive, but a mediocre private hospital. And unfortunately, these lessons of the past have been forgotten, and we have to bring them back into the discussion. And I think this is a very big, important topic that I saw in Greece as well, is that we need to get to educate people again in schools, in the unions, in the streets, in our solidarity movements, in all the different movements. Apolitical movements, the green movements of the students, which were apolitical, these are not areas where you understand what you are fighting for and why you are fighting for. And I think we need to bring back this social education of the past, and people will understand, and I think will align and strengthen the forces. To the point that we might not have to get to a revolution, although I do agree with you that if we want to address, for example, successfully the problem of the climate crisis, and not only the climate crisis, the biodiversity destruction that we have, and the need and the need for resources, I think we do have to get into a completely different system, not just reform the current one.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for your questions. We have like healthcare, but there's a lot of stuff missing, like cheap rents or higher wages. Poverty is an issue, at least in Germany. A lot of women, they work in low-paid jobs, they raise the kids, and then they face poverty when they're old. And there's really the number of homeless people grows. Where some people who are already jobless, and the neoliberals, they attack like the 8-hour working day. So there are attacks on like the working hours. People should work more and people earn less. So there are still like social fights every day that we fight in the unions, but also in the political spheres. So I think we will always have something to do as socialists. And the other question, that it needs a revolution. Yeah. I think this question is really difficult because the whole question of revolution and how this has to be conducted is really difficult. And there have been times where I'm sorry that I cannot provide agitation. I'm really phase of I'm really doubtful at the moment where all of this is heading. So, but I still think that we have to have major changes, not just small reforms, and but like grundsätzliche, like fundamental changes of society, like the privatization. This term privatization, it comes from the Latin word, and it means to steal, to rob from people, and this has to stop. But the trend is the opposite. Like Milei, they welcomed him like a pop star, the right wing people in Germany, and so we have like this drift back, and I think we have to fight against this right wing drift, but still have to provide a unique left vision and a narration of hope against this right-wing backlash. I'm so sorry that I'm not so optimistic and I cannot say it that we need the revolution, but because I don't see who is going to do it successfully.
Yeah, and right now we as socialists also have to have a good view what the situation and what the strength of the forces in a society are right now. And to be honest, if there would be a revolution in Germany right now, it would come from the very other side. So we are, right now we are in a situation of, as bad as they are, we have to protect institutions and reform them. We are not in a strength, unfortunately, where we are the powerful ones. I mean, you have seen the results there. So, and we have to consider this. And regarding the safety net, I grew up in the GDR in East Germany, and I've been told, and I believe this, and I could see it even if I was a child, the competition between the capitalists and the, let's say, socialist states was always a thing that helped the workers in the capitalist countries too, because there was a safety net where they wanted to show we can deliver in our capitalist countries in Europe, I'm not talking about the US here, in Europe thinks that the socialists have in their countries too. And with the fall of the Iron Curtain, with the defeat of this Soviet-style socialist system, this competition was no longer needed. It was like an open door for neoliberal policies that we in Germany, unfortunately, mostly have seen during the Social Democratic Green government of Gerhard Schröder and Joschka Fischer, because that was their plan to dismantle the safety net. So, and actually, we don't have a universal healthcare system in Germany. We have like a two-tier system where you decide if you are in a, let's say, state organized system or in a private system. So everyone has to be in the health insurance, which is good. But you are either in the state organized or in the private organized system, and that means you go to a doctor and you have two waiting rooms. So the first waiting room is packed with people, and then the second waiting room you get nice chairs and an espresso. So that's the German system we have right now, and this is also not nice because that's the reason why we are fighting for a universal health system. Thank you for your interest. So we've been through a lot of topics, starting with the European Union, going to Germany and Greece and Latin America and reform and revolution. And I thank you for the interest on a Friday night. And we will invite you for a few snacks and drinks if you want. And yeah, please come back again. So, thank you.